Welcome back. You are tuned in to IBL, inspired by Onika, speaking on life and inspiring people. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 16. And this is Poetry Flip number 3. And the title of today's poem is Mixed Bag of Trash. Now I know you're probably saying, well, what kind of title is that? I understand. Well, let me just explain. So this particular poem is based on a picture, and the picture is a young man. He is kind of sitting on a concrete stoop or wall, and he has a newspaper in his hand, but the newspaper is on fire. Now, anyone from those days when, newspapers were being printed, you know that most of the time, a lot of things in print were, crime stories. You just wouldn't find a lot of good things in there. So it was kind of one of those things where you just ask yourself after you've read the paper, like, why did I bother? Why did I bother reading this? It's just doom and gloom, no good news in there. So, but, the newspaper, I call it a mixed bag, okay, because not only did you have those stories about crime and people dying and people being robbed and things like that, there were also other things in there, like there were comics in the newspaper. You could find crosswords, horoscope. There was also an advice or like a gossip column in there as well. So people would write in and they would select which questions they wanted to answer. So, depending on which ones they picked, then they would print those in that particular column. And then also the newspaper was where you found your next apartment, also your next job as well. And then if you were in the market if you were selling something, you could run an ad in the paper to advertise what it is that you're selling. So, it had a lot of good use. But then on the other hand, there were some other things. It's like, it's like, why do I read this? Now, the other thing, too, that was nice about the newspaper is that twice weekly there would be ads and coupons in there. So, like if there was a grocery store, furniture stores, restaurants in your area, they would have all their ads placed in the paper twice a week. So, on Sunday, that would be the biggest paper, the heaviest paper. Okay, because everything would be in there, would be filled with all of those different ads for everything. And most of the time, you could find something in there. But, so anyone that was back there, in those times, those were also times where you had to actually go to a physical building to place your ad, and they would charge you either by the number of words or however many lines your ad is, and that's how you would pay for it. So anyway, this particular poem, again, called Mixed Bag of Trash, because this particular picture that inspired the poem, again, is a young man reading a paper that's on fire. And what do we do with trash? We burn it, correct? Okay, so now I'm going to go in and go ahead and get started on this particular one. Then I'll give you a little bit more backstory on it. All right, so today's poem, Mixed Bag of Trash. I can only read so much of this BS and such and such. Who in their right mind? This info is so maligned. Where are the hopeful stories of animal rescues and watching lorries, of goodwill and cheer, of not crime and fear? Stories about curing cancer, slashing grocery prices like a lancer, restoring faith in the system, less about being a robbery victim. Thieves need to get a job, stop stealing and being a slob. People work hard for their money. This is not the land of milk and honey. What about affordable housing and gas? Less homelessness? Are these things of the past? Where are the stories to make you smile, laugh inside and not bring up the bile? bile that makes you want to gag, reading news about this mixed bag, report on something better, about successes and the go getters. Maybe then I can read this thing, see a story that makes me want to sing, and not want to set the pages ablaze, watching the ashes blow away in a haze. Poem. So that is today's poem, Mixed Bag of Trash. And so you understand a little bit more about why I titled it Mixed Bag of Trash. But, if you can see the icon for this particular one, then you'll understand where the inspiration comes from and why I titled it, the way I did. Now, there were some other things that the newspapers were useful for. So, so what we now call a side hustle, back in the day, people used to have a paper route. So if you have a paper route, then that just simply means that some people, they had a subscription. They would get the newspaper delivered to their home. So if you had a paper route, that was your side hustle. So you would go delivering those newspapers to people's homes in your area. And some people did this, like in school, you want some extra money if you didn't have an allowance, that was a way for you to have your own little money. It was fun, but that's what a paper route is. If you ever hear that, that's what that is. And back in those days, there were three major newspaper publications, but at least back in my day anyway. I don't even know if they're still around, but one of them was the Star Ledger. Another one was the Jersey Journal, and then the New York Times. So those were kind of like the three major newspaper publications back in those days. And then also another thing that you could use the newspaper for, once you got sick of reading some of the things that happened in there, is that you can use it for a book cover to cover your textbooks for school. So, if you didn't want to buy the shiny book covers with the little plastic over it, all the fun colors they had, use newspaper. You can use that for a book cover. I know I certainly did. Also, another thing, you can use the newspaper for cleaning windows. You can use it when you're cleaning out the oven. You put it down on the floor underneath the oven door. Also, you can use the newspaper for to protect your floors if you had pets around. Put the newspaper down. So, I mean, newspapers, even though it wasn't about a lot of good news, it did have a lot of good uses. It really did. And then another thing, as I would see people, they would roll up the newspaper. If you did have a pet and he made a mess in the house, you roll up that paper and just, hit the dog like, nope, don't be doing that mess in the house. So that was another thing people used it for. So, it had its value. It really did. There's so many things you could use it for. If once you got tired of reading the bad news in there. I mean, there were other things, and also they had obituaries. Also, like the death notices were in there as well. Like I said, crosswords, comics. They had the ads for sales and things like that. So it wasn't all bad, but you get the idea. Anyone that was around in those days, you understand what I'm talking about. It's just like now when we watch the news on TV. Some people have just stopped even watching it because it's like, do I really want to hear the bad news for today? It's just one of those things. So, and then come to think of it, there used to be newspaper stands, and I don't know which areas still have those newspaper stands, but it's just basically like a little stand where not only did they have newspapers, but you could buy things on the run. Like if you're walking or you're taking the train or the bus to work, you would buy things like gum. They would even have magazines, just little quick things that you might need when you're in a rush, the hustle and bustle. And there used to be a lot of newspaper stands, but really see too many. They probably have more of them in New York, if any place. They have some in Jersey too, but there used to be a lot of them. And then, those newspapers, they used to be delivered fresh off the presses, or like in the early, early morning, you would have those papers delivered. And so they would be ready for that particular day. So that's how the newspapers used to work. For anyone that they're like, a newspaper, what's that? And they have the newspapers, if you see any around anymore, they are so thin now, very thin. But anyway, so that's the little story behind newspapers. And that was a part of the inspiration for this particular poem. And again, this is Poetry Flip number 3. The title of this poem is Mixed Bag of Trash. And if you enjoyed the content today, please leave a like, share, also subscribe or hit the follow button. And, I will look forward to next time. So until then, stay well and be blessed. And thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. You can hear this and all episodes on the Podbean app, YouTube, and Listen Notes. Until next time, stay well and be blessed.